As I've shared a couple of times, I'm working through the Buddhist scripture right now, the Dhammapada, the teachings of the Buddha, and really enjoying it. You know, one of the reasons that I like to wander through many of the world's scriptures is, actually there's many reasons, but I wanted to kind of frame it in a certain way, because it's important that you be rooted in one before you go wandering around the others. And why is that? You know, one of the Swamis of the order, Swami Ranganathananda, once told a story. This idea of digging a well, that if you're looking for water and you dig in a well, if you dig in one place, you'll hit your water. But if you dig, 2 or 3 feet in one place and don't hit the water and get disillusioned and you go dig somewhere else and then no water there, and you dig in 5 or 8 or 10 places, you never hit water. If you had stayed in one place and focused, you would have hit the water. And it's important to think in those terms, in the sense that all the world's religions are true. Yes, indeed, Mother will bring us home no matter which path we are on. That's a promise to us through infinite love. It's the only way that infinite love and infinite mercy can actually exist, really. It's like a scaffolding. You know, if you take lots of different pieces from disparate sets, they're not going to build a very stable scaffold. And so you choose your set to work with. You know, I've chosen the Vedic religion, that's Sanatana Dharma. So it gives a very broad-reaching set of tools that I find can be applied to any of the world's religions as I've studied them. But it's given me a root, and it's given me a framework from which to understand and work out the nuances of different ideas. And so in reading the Buddhist scriptures, which frankly are almost exactly the same. There's a few nuances here and there, but in my own shallow study as it is, I'm not making any great statements. I haven't really found a difference. But because it's basically, to me, Hinduism outside of India for a few thousand years, it's taken on some nuance and some perspectives that are really quite helpful and quite wonderful to look at. All of that to say that today's perspective is on mind. I read this morning this wonderful, very short verse in the Dhammapada. Says, faring far, wandering alone, bodiless, lying in a cave, is the mind. Those who subdue it are freed from the bond of Mara. Each one of these characteristics of mind is very important and very interesting. It's been very helpful to me to look at different ideas around the mind, because I'm doing a practice right now of following the breath and trying to identify with the very sense of being at the moment, not with any intercessory thoughts or mantras as an experiment, by bringing myself into the absolute present, which means to not let my mind be in a particular state, a particular vector of direction when it perceives at the moment or perceives a thought. So it gives you a real sense of freedom. And I'm using that idea to back out of moods and back out of tendencies that accumulated thought causes in the mind. These ideas of lust, these ideas of laziness, these ideas of being perturbed or being angry. They're an accumulation of wrong thinking. They put you in a state that's not there. And usually we try and stand in that state and fight that state from that perspective, and I found that to be crippling. It does not work. And so this idea of going to that stateless place within the self that's before mind, just by focusing on the breath and being absolutely present and not letting thought tell me about the moment, but hearing and receiving the moment as it is, has been very helpful for simply walking around anger or walking around lust, and not having to battle from the perspective of being lustful or being angry or being lazy or being tired. And that's been super great. Now, in talking about it, what comes to mind is the idea of a reel-to-reel tape recorder. Is anybody out there old enough, besides myself, to know what a reel-to-reel tape recorder is? It was 2 reels of tape, right? The tape would roll from one roll to the next one and pass over a tape head, a magnetic sensor that would read the tape and play the analog music through the speakers. And a lot of times in the diluted state for us, mind is actually the reels. You know, we have the memory, which is the reels that have already played, and then our projection of the future, which is the reel that is still to be played. And we miss the moment, which is actually where mind really is. You see, there's a deluded mind, there's the small trapped mind, there's a Maya mind, and there is the still mind, the free mind. We know from Sri Ramakrishna that the free mind, or the mind without disturbance, is actually the same as Brahman, that God and the pure mind are one and the same. Very interesting idea. Now, what we're talking about in this verse is not God mind. It's not the undisturbed mind. It's the ego mind. It's the mind that has a stored up identity and a stored up state and is acting from that place. So this mind is faring far. We know that, right? It can rove and wander the whole world and beyond the world. There is no limit. There is no boundary to where this mind can wander. And it wanders alone. Now, what does that mean, wandering alone? Interestingly enough, according to one of the Buddhist commentaries, is that the mind can only have one thought at a time, which is a marvelous thing to remember. You are battling one thought at a time. That gives you a great deal of power, a great deal of understanding in being able to step outside and just deal with the moment and one thought. It's not dealing with all of tomorrow's and the rest of your life or all of yesterday's. It's dealing with one thought in one moment. And that is something anybody can wrap their arm around to take care of. So faring far, wandering alone, one thought at a time, bodiless. So this is interesting, yes. You see, the mind actually isn't a body. The mind conceives the body. You see, and the mind can conceive many bodies. And you say, oh wait, how's that possible? It's always the same one for me. No, it's not. When you dream at night, the mind will come up with a new dream body, completely different, of any form, any shape, or no shape and no form. It can do any of it. So the mind conjures the body, and but it itself is without a body. It can have any body. It is not attached in its free state to any particular body, because it can be and manifest any body. Lying in a cave, yes, that's my favorite idea, this cranium here, that's the cave of the mind. Yeah. The first manifestation, to me, as I understand it, is brain of mind. You know, the brain is kind of the first manifestation there. And it's in that cave, the cave of the cranium, dark and by itself. And from that room of darkness, having never seen light, having never heard sound, having never felt touch, it is interpreting all of the senses to create the Mara, to create the Maya, the world that you live in, the world that you see, that you've interpreted. This world, this idea of Maya, this world, what is that? It's not a thing in particular, it's not a describable thing. It's simply what the unity looks like from a perspective that refuses to be a part of it. That's what Mara or Maya is. It's adharmic, it's selfishness, it's attachment, it's death. It's all of these untrue perspectives or untrue results of that wrong perspective, the perspective of not being one, of being separate and apart. Those who subdue it are freed from the bond of Mara, right? So if you can learn to not be the mind, if you can learn to not place your me and mine in everything that goes through the mind, indeed, that's the key. That is freedom. That's being able to live in this moment. And that's a state of absolute ecstasy, absolute oneness. That is nirvana, that is samadhi, that is freedom.